Welcome to Straight Talk. The economic effect of the unseasonal snowstorm in southern Otago is still being tallied up, but it'll make a considerable dent in production figures for the current season. What will it mean for our national economy, increasingly reliant on agricultural earnings? And storms of a different sort are being weathered in the farming community as Alan Hubbard's former empire is unravelled. What lessons do farmers need to learn from what's played out over recent months? Agriculture Minister David Carter has recently met with Pukekohe vegetable growers, with some keen to press claims for an investigation of their industry. What would that achieve? Today I'm joined by KPMG agribusiness leader Ian Proudfoot and National Business Review journalist Duncan Bridgeman. Well, Ian, what's the effect of the snowstorm? We're going to find out in quite a wee while, aren't we?
Yeah, well, we'll find out over the season, but they're talking about somewhere between 350 and 500,000 lambs lost. When you're only talking about an average profitability of a sheep and beef farm somewhere around $54,000, for those farmers in Southland, you can expect they've lost quite a lot of that profit coming out of the farm. That therefore reduces cash flow available to reinvest and must again call into question whether they stay as sheep and beef farmers or look to convert to dairy. Right.
How accurate are the initial estimations likely to be? I mean, I've seen reports that say that no farmer was unaffected by what happened.
It would be hard to be unaffected. There's very few farmers that have got covered stock sheds down in Southland and would have had the ability to bring their sheep in. So I can see nobody being unaffected. I suppose the extent will depend on where they are and how particularly bad the storm was for that area.
Right. What do you think, Duncan? I mean, Federated Farmers has been out there after the event giving assistance where it can by way of food parcels and, you know, labour on farms where they can help. But should there have been a quicker government response?
Well, it's a bit of, you know, it's a disaster really for individual farmers, and as Ian says, the economy is going to take a hit eventually. I think you can't sort of always rely on the government to come straight to aid all the time, and there has been some criticism whether sort of everyone was prepared for something like this.
Now farmers are, you know, collecting the dead stock, trying to get the surviving stock back into sort of reasonable condition. Is there anything that could immediately happen at this stage of things?
I recall back in 1992 when there was a big snowstorm in Canterbury, and there was a big response then, which was also sort of came a few days afterwards, a few weeks afterwards. But the North Island rallied around at their sort of counterparts in the south, and shipments of stock feed and hay came down. So yeah, it's a good chance for the North Island to step up.
To help out, yeah, in that way.
I think it's worth noting, you know, companies like Ravensdown have already come out with quite significant assistance packages in terms of how they're phasing the payments. And I think that's really positive. It'd been good to see other companies taking similar sort of steps.
Right.
Plus, I suppose, the challenge here is you can't insure for a loss that comes from a natural storm such as that. So you've got a completely different situation between Canterbury, where it's an insured event, and Southland, where it's a completely uninsurable event. It's very hard to plan your business to cope with a large uninsurable event.
Right. Just be wary, I guess, is the message there.
Yeah.
What about the effect that this may have on some of those indicators that now seem to be coming more to the fore, that New Zealand might be, the economy might be dipping back into recession again?
I think the conversations I've been having with clients over the last 4 months have strongly indicated that at best we're on a sort of flat plane. And there's a strong tendency, people have seen their businesses slow down quite dramatically. I think if you look at the construction sector, that appears to be heading towards a recession, and that was always going to happen as the latent demand that was there worked its way through. This is just another factor. It just makes things harder again. And the global economy is weak at best. I spent quite a lot of time in North America over the last month or so, and they're definitely talking about a double dip. And I think the Prime Minister's pretty bullish by saying he's convinced we're not going to see another recession. I think there's a strong chance we will see a double-dip recession now.
What do you think, Duncan?
Yeah, the numbers are not good, and I think that depending on where the global situation heads, yeah, you're right, you know, there's a lot of backwash coming out of the last recession still in retail across construction as well, which is just nothing happening. And now with the agricultural industry hit by the weather, people forget how strong or how important that is to the underlying economy.
So is there anything that could be done in terms of securing the agricultural input to the economy that we need to such a great extent, Ian? Anything more than is happening at present?
I think that it's important the government continues to do the things it's doing, investing in R&D, get that pipeline full of products that we can bring through, innovation that we can take to customers, work very hard at utilising the free trade agreements that we've got and trying to be innovative. You know, that's how we'll be successful.
Right.
Will it keep us out of a double-dip recession? I don't think so. I think it's probably too late for that. But what we can now have is a strong growth coming out of this second dip.
Yeah, OK, well, we'll see what happens there. Now, Duncan, Alan Hubbard, the third report of the statutory manager of some of his companies, makes for a pretty depressing reading, doesn't it, in terms of some of the arrangements he had with farmers, which were a verbal agreement and sometimes a little more than that.
Yeah, it's very sad and complete disaster really. And my thoughts are on both sides, from first the investors and then borrowers. That you need to be aware of who you're dealing with and the systems that are in place. For investors, you have to have an exit strategy, or you have to have a good philosophy in terms of what might happen if things go wrong, and that hasn't been the case here, and the systems are just not there for them, and what was represented to them hasn't come through. On the other side, people have been able to borrow money at sort of often good low interest-free rates, and so that skewed the other playing field. With that out of the picture, it probably levels the playing field a little bit. But
what do you think, Ian? Who's going to mop up the mess?
I'm not sure there's anybody there ready to lend at the moment, and you know, credit's still pretty tight. I think what the whole situation shows is the importance of having governance right, and you've got to, at both the farm level, who you're borrowing from, how you're borrowing, how you're structuring your borrowing, how you're reporting, and at the lender level, the governance has got to be good. We've said before, we don't think governance in the agricultural sector in New Zealand is as strong as it could be. I think that view's becoming more strong. There needs to be a real focus on improving governance throughout the whole industry. You know, New Zealand needs to up the game. And I think some of the initiatives like the new financial regulations the government are bringing in are going to force people to up the game there. Yeah,
well, that's a good way to be looking forward. Now, Ian, I know you've spent a bit of time with Pukekohe vegetable growers recently. They were suggesting to Agriculture Minister David Carter, when he went to see them, that they still might like to have an investigation of their whole industry in terms of pricing right through to the consumer. What do you think?
I think for vegetable growers, the key is ensuring that they're bringing the right product to the market at the right time. The challenge is it is a very much still a seasonal industry, so you will get peaks, and the pricing will reflect those seasonal peaks. And the industry itself, I don't get the impression that the supermarkets are you know, taking super profits. I think they do use it as an area where they do make profits, but I think what's important to my mind for the industry is getting on and trying to work out how they develop export markets, because that's how the industry will grow. So it's how you can build those relationships. Do you need to brand your products, and really moving it to the next step? And I think the initiatives that Horticulture New Zealand have brought into place in terms of their 2020 strategy, that's the right course of action for that industry. And it's important they actually get on and start doing some work in that area.
Yes. After the break, plenty more to discuss. We talk Fonterra and the search for new directors, pit fruit receiverships as the industry struggles, and greenhouse gas emissions across the ditch. So stay with us. Welcome back to Straight Talk. Now it's on to You Said It, timely topics in the ag media we want to talk about further. Now, Duncan, there's Fonterra directors' elections coming up. 3 incumbents, including the chairman, Sir Henry van der Heyden. They're all up for re-election, 2 newcomers. What are the big issues likely to be, do you think?
Well, dairy farmers are a staunch bunch, and they are looking for someone or for governance in the cooperative to look after their interests first and foremost. But they have to remember that it is a global company, and they need to have experienced directors on the board. Fonterra has $15 billion worth of annual revenue, so it's not like you can throw anyone into the mix. Not saying that the candidates haven't got some good qualities, but farmers have to be mindful that this is a very big business. It's spread all around the world, and there's a lot of issues at stake. Sir Henry's the chairman. He's battled through some difficult situations over the last couple of years, and he's in the spotlight recently as well. So maybe there's a move for some fresh blood on the board.
But he's certainly got the capital restructuring proposal put to bed, which was a big concern last time round. So that has to stand him in good stead, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think they've done as well as they could on that front. They're up against it with 2 different sort of opinions there, but what they've come out with is a good base to work on, and I think that we'll see some capital brought into the company, and they may be able to use that wisely, hopefully.
What do you think, Ian? It's no longer good enough for farmers to be voting for a fellow farmer like them who, they happen to catch up with every so often. They need guys with real sound business experience.
You're talking about New Zealand's largest company. You're talking about, as Duncan says, a major global company which is extremely complex, has very complex treasury, and is dealing with some of the world's biggest companies. The people running that company have got to be absolutely spot on, so the farmers get the real benefit out of Fonterra. So I think that's the key thing from my perspective. Farmers need to look at, have the candidates got the ability to run a global company?
Right, OK. Well, there's some tough times in the Bay of Plenty with a couple of pit fruit businesses going into receivership just recently. Why hasn't this industry been able to make the most of, its deregulated state when there were high hopes for what could happen?
I had an interesting day a month or so ago where I sat and listened to growers talk for a period of time. And to me, the challenges they have are they don't have a unique product. They don't have a selling period that's being squeezed by global competition, and they really don't have a unique factor like Zespri has with kiwi fruit. So